Hello and welcome to TidyX episode 15. Wow, we're already at episode 15. All right, TidyX is a screencast that's dedicated to explaining how our code works and functions. Typically, we're going to be using a Tidy Tuesday dataset, either a submission or taking the data on our own to go through and explain it. My name's Ellis Hughes. You can find me on Twitter at Ellis_Hughes. I am a statistical programmer at Fred Hutch Cancer Research Center.
And my name's Patrick Ward, and I do data analysis in sport, and you can find me on Twitter at OSPPatrick, and you can always reach the both of us at tidy.explain@gmail.com. All right, what do we got today? We're on episode 15 here.
15. All right. So the Tidy Tuesday dataset this week is on American slavery and Juneteenth. So America, as we know, has a complicated history with slavery. That's well discussed, and it continues to this. And slavery obviously doesn't, but the effects of it continue to this day. So Thomas took a bunch of data from various sources. He took the US Census, information about slave voyages, and some information from the Black Past, and combined it all for us this week to analyze and visualize. So he does make a point here to use your best judgment when you're going through this data. There's a lot of pain and suffering that we can't understand, and so we did our best this week to be as sensitive as we could to this data set when we were going through it. So the data, or the visualization that we're going to be discussing this week, isn't so much a visualization so much as a report. So I worked this morning and put together this our Markdown that results in an HTML document that's going through the US Census data.
Yeah, this is a really nice, just a nice, clean-looking kind of report. And, we've talked about tables before in the past. We did some stuff with conditional formatting on tables. And this is just sort of another way of looking at tables using some different conditional formatting with color table. And, and putting together kind of a cool interactive report. The first thing that immediately jumps out is I love the table of contents there in the left. So everything's selectable. So if you clicked on South, for example, it's going to drop us right down to the South.
The West,
why don't
Pacific,
we get into the Markdown there and kind of show them how you set up a table of contents and then how this table came together.
All right. Yeah. So let's get this going. Yeah. So I used, let me save that quickly. All right. So I used in our Markdown document to generate this report. It's the easiest way and the best way I've found to combine prose, so normal text, with your code, so you can combine your code and all the tables and figures that you generate directly with any text that you want to be creating with your with like a report, for example. So the way our Markdown starts is with a YAML header, YAML. They can get a little bit confusing. But for the most part, you don't have to play around with YAML headers too much. With our Markdown, they've made it fairly straightforward, and the templates that come with it already have a lot of that information clearly laid out for you to fill out. So first it's the title, then you have the author. So in this case, I wrote this, and I wrote it this morning. Then it comes to the output, and this output tag here is what defines how our Markdown is going to be interpreting and outputting the results. So you can output to, by default, HTML, a PDF, or a Word document, and it'll take our Markdown report and generate it as those outputs. In this case, I chose to do an HTML report. I find HTML is the most flexible output type there that we can output to. PDF I find to be a little bit frustrating, because that means you have to be using LaTeX, and that comes with a whole bundle of other technical difficulties. It's not quite as flexible. And then Word documents are also they're fairly controlled. And there's not a lot of support in the R community, it seems like, in outputting to a Word document. I think part of that is the development to an HTML is so much simpler, and there's so much more flexibility you get out of it that people do that.
Yeah.
Sorry, I went on a little bit of a tangent with that. But then after I define the HTML document, I define the TOC and the TOC float. So TOC stands for table of contents, and yes, I do want a table of contents. And then I'm telling it that I want a float table of contents, and I have a few options here. I don't recall exactly what collapsed and smooth scroll mean. I don't think you actually need to define them as no for it to work. But these are the suggested ways that Yue in his knitr book suggested that people use this. So I use that. Yue knows all.
So when you selected that you wanted a markdown, can you just walk through for everybody? For example, you hit the little green, the white up in the left corner there with the green plus sign, and you say that you want a markdown. Was there
yes.
a template that you selected specifically?
In this case, I didn't.
Okay.
In this case, I just used the basic HTML output.
And then filled in the blank.
If I can type, I report. And so this is what a basic HTML document looks like. They have the title, the name, your name. They automatically populate this if they're able to in the current date. And
Yep.
by default, they output to HTML. You could also choose PDF, and you can also change this at any point. So you can do actually want to do a PDF, and it won't impact anything really on the programming side of things. All right.
Perfect.
So, like I said, part of the reason that I like to use our Markdown is because we can combine prose, so the normal text, with our code. So here I wrote a little bit of a background, kind of explaining where this data source is from, and the potential issues that we saw, with the issues being things to consider when you're looking at this data set and what it can potentially mean. So so we have this background there. Then we have a section where I wrote, I took a screenshot of the US Census map that is available, and I dropped this in using Markdown syntax. Say I want to have this PNG listed right here so that it'll show it all. So this is all set up before I've actually written any code. So now I get into the setup piece here.
And just for the people watching, the PNG that you're loading there is coming directly from your working directory. So this is pointed at your working directory, and that is a file within that?
Yes, exactly. So this is going to be referencing the directory that our Markdown is saved in.
Mm-hmm.
So like this if on your RStudio, this is my working directory here, and then this is the PNG that I'll be dropping in there.
Yep. Cool.
Once we drop that in, or once we knit this report. So next, knitr has some option chunks setting that we can do up here rather than having to do it at each individual chunk level. So overall, I really don't want to have my code being shown. I want this to be really clean. I don't want any warnings, errors, or messages being returned from my code. So this will make it so when you're running through your code interactively, you'll see warnings or whatnot as you go, and you don't necessarily want to show that in your final report. And so the way you can do that is you can set these all to be false there, and that should block most messages from being output to your final report. Next, I'm loading in the libraries I'm going to be using. I wrap them in a suppress packages or package startup suppress package startup messages. That is quite the name. But what it does is it captures any outputs that could be coming from any of the libraries as they get loaded into your R session to prevent them from being output. So like Tidyverse is notorious for just spewing out bunches of information that works great when you're working interactively with it, because it reminds you, oh yeah, I've got this package loaded, and here's things to consider. But if you're running a report, it kind of is a little bit frustrating. Next, knitr. So that's the package that Yue wrote to be generating these types of reports. So this will just expand what I can do by default. So next we have the Tidy Tuesday R package, the package I wrote to download data from the Tidy Tuesday repository. So you can install that from my GitHub. I've got the comment there explaining what code you can use to download that. And next I've got another package there called colortable. And colortable, we'll show later on what it does, but you can install it. I've also got the code there on how you can install that. Cool, so now we've got all our libraries loaded, so now we need to get the data in. And so I start up a new chunk, call it data. I like to name each chunk specifically for what it's going to be doing. And here I load with the ttload package from the ttload function from the Tidy Tuesday R package. I put the date that I'm going to be pulling the information in and running that.
There you go. So what's the deal with the capture.output?
Sure.
That you got wrapped there.
So as you saw here in my console, it's printing out a bunch of information, like letting you know the status of the downloads, because otherwise you could be sitting there for a couple seconds and it's not doing anything, and you think your R session is frozen or something like that. Mm-hmm. So this text is being output to give you information, but it doesn't necessarily get caught by the warnings false, error false, message false. So capture output is a function where it'll execute whatever code is within that using this structure here with the curly braces. But it'll then capture anything that would have gone to your console in terms of like messages or text and whatnot, and I'm then assigning it to the object quiet, so that means that it won't print it out. Mm-hmm. So now if I rerun this, and so these are messages, so these don't get captured by capture.output, but these downloading messages do. So the combination of message equals false and capture output, this is now quiet during my output.
Cool.
All right. So now we've got our data in our R session, and we're gonna start going through it. So I chose to, and I think we alluded to this earlier, I chose to use the census data that existed in the data set. So let's actually quickly bring up the the README. So scroll down to the census. So there's a few fields here. There's region and division, which define the census region and census division, what year the census was performed, the total population by region and division, then and then it's numbers by the white population, black population, and then they broke that further down into, this was done by the census back then, the free black population and the enslaved black population. So what I decided that I wanted to do was show percentages of what's going on here. So let's take a quick look actually at the TT census data as it stands here. So we've got the region and division. So we can see the regions, TT census region unique. We've got USA total, so that's all across the US, and it's one for each year. Then Northeast, Midwest, and South and West, and those are the regions that exist. So USA total, obviously, all across the U.S. The Northeast, Midwest, South, and West are the various regions broken down. So I knew going in I wanted to have a table that would show all across the U.S. what was going on, and then break it down further into the subregions. So in order to do that, I did a mutate here to fill in division, which in this case were NA with USA, when the region was USA total. I guess you didn't really expressly have to do this, but I found it easier for me to understand what was going on when I was working through this data. And then within each region, they also had totals, but I didn't want to look at that. And division was still NA for those, so you can kind of see in this 10th row here, this is the Northeast region, and they have the totals here, but they have division as NA. So I didn't want to keep those, so I remove cases where division is NA. And now we're going to actually get into generating the numbers that are going to be populating our tables. So this first one is I wanted to have a character version of total. So total represents the total population in that region. So either the US as a whole or the subregions. Next, I calculated what was the percentage of enslaved people in the black population. And so I did this by dividing the number of black slaves by the number of black people in the region, and I used the function percent out of the scales package to convert it into a percentage, as opposed to a leave it as a number between 0 and 1. And so this just makes the scales package provides a lot of tools to make it easier for us to see some numbers that can kind of get a little difficult, or conversions that you have to do regularly. And so this converts it into a nicer percentage.
The only thing to be aware of with that function from that package is if you convert something to a percent, it's converted to a character. And so it no longer retains its numeric properties. So if you wanted to do any further math with it, say in a later chunk, you would have to convert it back.
Yes, and so that is a thing to note about this package, the scales function is it will convert them into a character value.
Yep.
Cool. All right. So what I also did is I wanted to add some color to these tables there, to try to show what's going on with the percentages and really highlight them. So what I did is I used this function color vector, which is from the color tables package, and I set the text color to be, if there are any slaves, set that color to be red. If there are no slaves, set it to blue. Mm-hmm. Just as a very simple way to see what's going on in our data set. Then I go through and calculate what are the percentage of the population of black and white in the census at that point. I subset then to keep the columns to keep only year, region, division. I rename total C, which is the character version of the total population, convert that into a named total population. We get then percent enslaved black population, percent population black, and percent population white. Let's execute all that, and we can actually take a quick look at this, because the benefit of the color table package is it provides the C vector object that allows you to print things in your table, and it's colored. So you can see that as we go. It's 1870, so that's after the 13th Amendment was fully
1865.
Yeah. So once that was fully done between these two censuses, it was 0, which is good. All right. So what I did next is I didn't want to go through, and I didn't want to have to generate a section for each of the regions. So I didn't want to have to do USA, West, South, Southwest region, or whatever. So what I do is, and I do this a lot in my regular job, is if I have the definitions within my data set, which normally you do, I'll subset to keep, or not subset, I'll get a unique key. So in this case it's region, so that's like the higher level that I'm going to be sorting over. So region is USA, and the West, South, and whatnot. And I use this walk function. So walk comes from per, and what walk is when you want only the side effects. So you don't want to have whatever you could potentially be returning from this function that you're going to be writing. You actually want to have whatever plot is going to be or table is going to be generated from this, or any outputs that are coming from this, but you don't actually want the data that was going to be returned from it. It's kind of a weird way to think about things, but it allows us to do things like this, where for each what this code is doing now, for each region, generate a header. This is your Markdown header where it's, okay, put in a new line, draw 2 pound signs, put in the region name, and then do a new line with there. So this would be like if you'd wrote the West, and then it did that. All right, and then now it's going to run even more details where it's like, okay, so now I've got the region. What are the divisions within that region? Let's pull that out. So now we have a vector of all the divisions within that region, and then for each of those divisions, go through and create another header where it's now going to have the 3 pound signs. So now it'll be new line, pound, 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 new region. I can't think of one off the top of my head. And so now we've got these 2 Markdown headers that exist, and when the Markdown goes to generate it, it'll treat those as headers that were already in our Markdown document. That's a nice way to programmatically do that. I didn't want USA to have any subdivisions here, so I wrapped that in a little if statement. So now that unfortunately gets run every time, but it's fine. And now we're going to be generating the actual table that gets plotted for each of our regions here. And so I take the population data set there. I filtered to keep the division that I'm interested in plotting at this point. I remove then the division and region columns that exist. So let's take a quick peek at what's going on there. Right, I should define them. Let's get a div, population percents, division, let's get the third one. So the division we're going to look at this time is Middle Atlantic. So we're going to subset and keep. So now we have a tibble that is 9 rows, these columns that we care about, putting into our table. I then arrange it by year so that right now it's descending, so it's 1870 going down to 1790. I want to flip that. So that's what this arrange will do. Then there's some styling that I have to do for the table to be printed out nicely. So that is converting it into a data frame, calling format on that, which will format each of the columns within the data frame. I set the names because I converted it into a data frame. The names are no longer what I want them to be as. They are cleaned up the way that data frame wants them to be. So I'm setting the actual names that I want to keep it using as. Then I'm going to send it into cable, which is the function out of knitr that allows you to produce these tables. There's a lot of functionality that can exist within this, but I'm keeping it to the stable or the original one, which I think does a really good job. And then I call print. Because we're within this walk statement here, if I didn't have this there, it wouldn't output the cable result that I want. And so by calling print, it then knows, oh, I need to be printing this output. So
what did the up at the top here? You have results equal as is.
Yeah.
Can you explain that?
Mm-hmm. I can try. So results as is. So this tells knitr when it's going through and running things to leave the results that come out of this chunk, quote, as is. There's a few other options that exist. You can do markup, which converts it into the markup version of it. So knitr does a lot of stuff on the back end that we don't necessarily know about, as just, that we're using it up at this level. So markup allows it to do that. Hold means that I believe that it'll hold off from showing the result until later on. I don't use that option. And then hide means don't show the output at all, any output from this chunk.
Yep.
So the as is tells knitr, don't make any changes to what I'm outputting. Treat it as it is.
Got it.
When it goes to then generate the report.
And with your table, you used the scales package to define the percentages.
Yes.
You could also probably use the scales package on your total population to put in some commas, so it's easier to see the number in the millions or something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we could. We
I
can
can't remember. It's like scales.
use it.
It's not continuous. I can't remember what
I
it
think
was.
it's scales commas.
Oh, maybe it is. Yeah, I can't recall what it was, but I think maybe it is scales continuous. Or
let me quickly get that. I'm having a dyslexic moment at the moment. Scales, comma.
Yeah, comma. That's right.
Total population.
Total population. There we go. Yeah, I think that'll look kind of cool.
Oh, error. What? Oh, non-numeric. Oh, because I converted it into a...
It's a factor. Or a character value, isn't it?
Yeah. Let's do that. There you go.
Oh, there. Now. That's nice.
There we go. All right. So here, let me quickly show you, because this can be shown in my console here. So the nice thing also about color table is that you can print everything into your console and it'll show up exactly how you expect it to go into your HTML, so you don't have to wholly compile it. So this is what it will generally look like. So USA total, we have our table there. Next we have the Northeast, New England is one section there, then Middle Atlantic, whatnot. All right, so let's knit this and generate the output that we looked at earlier, now that we've made a few changes to it.
Okay. Let's see what we got.
All right, let me zoom out a little bit. All right, so we've got what we started with. So we've got the title, the background explaining the data set. I thought it was important to have the map regions laid out here, the way that the US Census is viewing the regions. Here we can look at the USA total, what's going on with that. Jump down to the Midwest, the West, the Pacific. We can easily navigate all of this and look at what's going on at these tables and the coloring that's going on. So I thought this was a good way to visualize this data, to go through and try to understand what's going on with this. Yeah, do you have any other comments, Patrick?
No, I mean, I think it tells a really nice story. You could go up to the top and see USA total and look at how things went over time. Obviously, once you hit 1870 there, you're down to 0%. And then I think what's the most interesting of this is sort of looking at it USA total, but then like actually digging into the different regions and seeing, for example, if you go down to the South, where there we go, where obviously the Confederacy was, and you could see how drastically different that is than some of the other regions, like up into the Northeast in the New England area, which I think is fascinating. And then obviously, when was the Oregon Trail? When did they start making their way west? You could see how few people kind of lived out that way. I mean, they're not even close to 1 million people by 1870 in the Pacific yet. Look at that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just interesting. I mean, it's really interesting just to see the way that kind of how all this stuff sort of settled and how it changed over time as as America progressed as a country, as all of these things were taking place.
Mm-hmm. And as we continue to develop and learn and understand things, and try to come together more as a country.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, so I think it's a really cool. Yeah, nice report. Easy functionality. You could click through table of contents. Yeah, a lot of things going on in there. So
yes.
Pretty cool.
Yeah. So hopefully this was valuable for everybody here to learn how to do this. Maybe try to explore this and try to understand, even though we can't, what's going on. All right. Well, thank you for listening. My name's Ellis Hughes. You can find me on Twitter at Ellis_Hughes.
And I'm Patrick Ward, and you can find me on Twitter at OSP Patrick. And you can hit up both of us with questions or comments or ideas at tidy.xyz explained@gmail.com.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.